If you are a weightlifter, then it is likely that you've had to rehab some form of injury throughout your weightlifting career. But can you tell me of a single weightlifter that you know that's had to rehab an injury since the day that they were born?
I've literally had an injury from the moment I came into this wonderful world. I was born with a birth injury called Palsy.
That is the voice of today's guest, a weightlifter called Benedict Millson, or as most people know him, Mr. Big Friday. A weightlifter who has had to rehab his injuries from 2 weeks old, with doctors actually telling his mother that he may never ever be able to lift his arm above his head.
Essentially, my mum, hard work for the first 12 to 13 years of my life, was my left arm was essentially useless.
In this conversation today, we talk about how Benedict turned a lifelong injury into a lifelong pursuit, how he overcame self-doubt and mental health struggles, and why he chose probably one of the hardest sports imaginable for someone with an injury like his.
The way I think of it is every single time I've done a snatch ever, or a clean and jerk ever, it's been slightly imbalanced. Probably always will be. There's not much I can do about that, except to minimize it as much as possible. People say to me like, oh, you'll come back stronger. I'm also well aware that I might not.
As usual, this podcast is going to be broken up into 2 parts. So if you like part 1 today, make sure you subscribe to this podcast, click on the notification bell so you know when part 2 is coming out. And with that all being said, it's time to get into the show. So I have found in my time that a lot of weightlifters say that they are always injured and always rehabbing something. But you're probably one of the very few weightlifters who has actually always been rehabbing something. Can you tell me and sort of tell the viewers a little bit about your history with sort of rehabbing injuries and sort of what you've dealt with, all of your life?
Yeah. So I want to lay claim to be maybe the only weightlifter who has had rehab injuries from literally being born. So I was born with a birth injury called Palsy, or brachial plexus palsy, and there's a branch of nerve roots in the I think it's the shoulder called the brachial plexus, and it was severed when I was born, so it was ripped. And that was just due to a difficult birth. Basically, the midwife had to pull me out arm first. And in doing that, obviously, it was it caused the injury. She had to do that. She had no choice. Obviously, it was either that or I die, stillborn. So, or during birth, sorry. So, I've literally had an injury from the moment I came into this wonderful world. And that caused, throughout my whole childhood, my mum was just incredible with giving kind of rehab exercises to me as a kid. And she would help me out with rehab exercises. We're talking from grasping her finger. She'd put her finger in my hand and I'd have to grasp it, apparently, when I was a baby and a child. And she would give me big kind of cutlery with big handles to hold on to, because my left arm was essentially useless in the early age of my life. I had no nerve function, I had no innervation, so I couldn't use any of the muscles in my arm. It would just hang by my side and it would just droop. And it was very lucky because someone who was in the hospital at the time had just gone through training to identify Erb's palsy. Usually it goes a couple of years, I think, without actually being kind of noticed. And I was fortunate enough to have it diagnosed after about a week and a half of my life. So I started physio at 2 weeks old. 2 weeks old, I was doing physio stuff. And I picture myself as a baby doing bicep curls in the hospital gym. And obviously that's not true, but very lucky to kind of get it diagnosed that early. And it meant that my chance of full recovery was so much higher. Now, everyone else who I've met or virtually met or researched who has Erb's palsy has really long-lasting effects. Usually they can't lift their arm fully over their head straight. If they are lucky enough to lift it overhead, it's usually with a bent elbow and a bent wrist. But to get full extension, shoulder, wrist, and elbow, very, very rare. I don't know of anyone who has. So when I remember my mum telling me that she was told from a young age that I would never lift my arm over my head, and I would regain some function, but not really all. And essentially my mum, hard work for the first 12 to 13 years of my life, rehabbing me every day. She said she would do rehab stuff with me, and that would be kind of our time alone, I think. And when I then started athletics at a young age, 12, 13, sprinting, jumping, and that was kind of when I first started noticing that one arm was a little bit different. Usually it would kind of come to play where I had kind of full range, but when I was going through sprints, my right arm would come forward and back, and my left arm would always be across the body rather than kind of forward and back. And I'd have to really consciously think about it. And then when we did things in the gym, pull-ups, dips, anything like that, my left arm would always be the weakness one in it. And I could see it when I wore my athletics vest. When I looked in the mirror, that one side was way bigger and one side was a lot less defined. And obviously throughout childhood, that can be a bit of an impact on your mental health as well. But I think that imbalance from a very young age, where I basically had the first 18, 19, maybe 20 years of my life with a major imbalance on one side, has just caused kind of irreparable imbalances in my body. And I know now that I can't look at someone else who's weightlifting and has had no major injuries like that and compare myself, because I just can't. It's not the same. Lewis Thomas, Gez?
Yeah.
He competed on the weekend, and I was watching his snatch, and like, there's no twisting, there's no nothing. Everything looks super symmetrical and super perfect. And I was like, I want to be like you, man. And I just can't. I just don't think I can. It's obviously got way better than it was. So long story short, I started weightlifting when I was 19, when I started university. And I had it in my head that I wanted to get bigger. I wanted to build my shoulders. I wanted to build my traps, more so than performance. But I basically wanted to start a sport that was the hardest possible sport for someone in my position to do, just as a kind of fuck you to the system, I guess, and just as a prove myself that I can do anything. And so I basically thought, what's the hardest sport in the world someone with a birth injury like palsy can do? And it wasn't 100 meters, because that's, you can get by. It was lifting as heavy weight as possible, overhead, as dynamically as possible. So I thought, yeah, weightlifting, that'd be a good idea. The first couple of years, weightlifting, maybe I regretted it every time I dropped a bar on my head or dislocated my shoulder, and had crazy pains because of it. But I don't regret it now, and I've kind of come to, I've gone reasonably far in weightlifting, and it's become to me, it's a nice story. It's a nice inspirational story. It's caused many injuries. It's caused many, many, many injuries down the line. Every time I get injured, it always comes back to, is it because of an imbalance and like an overload of a certain area? So let's say, for example, when my right knee flares up and I have tendonitis in my knee, is it because my left shoulder is more internally rotated? I'm twisting over to the right. I'm putting more pressure through the right. Maybe. Obviously, I don't know, but probably. So every time the way I think of it is, every single time I've done a snatch ever or a clean and jerk ever, it's been slightly imbalanced. Probably always will be. There's not much I can do about that, except to minimize it as much as possible. And yeah, so that's the long story short. I was born with Erb's palsy. I chose the hardest sport in the world for that, and here we are now.
Hey there, everyone. I just want to take a moment here in a break to talk to you about a brand that I am really advocating for right now. Now, this isn't a brand as paid sponsorship or anything like that. It's just a brand that I found that I like and that I want to tell you all about, and that is Dead Grip tape. Now, I don't know about you when it comes to thumb tape, but I really struggle. Sometimes I often just borrow someone's who I'm training with. I'll be like, hey, have you got some tape? And I'll borrow that. And 9 times out of 10, the tape's not that good. It'll either roll up the thumb or won't stick, or especially if it's hot in the summer and it's my hands and palms are sweaty, it just comes right off. Sometimes it can be absolutely useless. And that is until I found dead grip tape. Last week, I was training with my teammate, Finley Austin, and he let me borrow some of this. And I tell you, like, forgive my language, but it is grippy as fuck. This tape will stay on your thumbs all day long. So I reached out to Dead Grip Tape, just told them I was a big fan and, just wanted to say give them my appreciation as such. So this isn't paid sponsorship or anything like that. It's just a chance for me to advocate for someone that I think is good. I like good stuff. I like stuff that works, and Dead Grip Tape absolutely works. So get yourself some. Now, with that being said, it's time to get back into the rest of the episode. That's a mental story. I can't, like you said, I don't think I know any other weightlifter who has that story. I know plenty of weightlifters who have had injuries, like myself included. And a question I want to ask you is, I find maybe a lot of weightlifters, when they get injured, they, go through some sort of mental health struggle. But at that point, in most of the weightlifters I know, they are, fully formed sort of functioning adults. They've gone through childhood and they have maybe the coping mechanisms to deal with that. What was it like for you to growing up, with having this all of your life, and growing up as a kid and then as a teenager, and how you were able, to cope and to manage?
So I think if I started weightlifting when I was 12 or 13, it would not have lasted long. I wouldn't have been able to deal with it mentally. I was quite lucky that I did track and field from the young age, from 12 to about 19. I did the 100 meters and triple jump. So yes, my left arm was weaker, but it wasn't a massive impact. I was just running and jumping. It wasn't shot put with the left arm, for example. So that helped. When the issues I had in childhood were more related to self-esteem and body image, and looking in the mirror and seeing the imbalance really, really affected me, especially as someone with OCD who liked certain things to be done perfectly. It's very hard knowing that this will never be perfect. Whatever you do, it will just never be perfect. And my kind of go-to coping mechanisms for that, the good ones were, I guess, training. And I would probably overtrain as a child. I would go early to the field before school, do my hill sprints, and then my plyometrics, go to school, and then afterwards train again. Heavy track sessions or plyometric sessions, and obviously then my knees would get shot from doing all the jumps and stuff, but mentally this is what I needed at the time, and I don't regret that at all. If I didn't have that, I would have spiraled. And then with my other mental health issues, the other coping mechanism I had was self-harm. So cutting up my body, and it was to, I was doing it from a, not a super young age, but kind of 14, I want to say, up till about 21 was, I think, or 22, I think, was the last time I self-harmed. So 8 to 10 years, 8 years, let's say. And when I would cut my body in various places, it would be as a way to release the frustration of knowing that I'll never be perfect. So let's just make more imperfections, I guess. When I did it, it felt like it was a release. It felt like it was a quote unquote safer release than something else I could have done. It's obviously not the best thing. I don't recommend it. I'm not saying people should do it, but for me at the time, it was either because I had a lot of other mental health issues as well, some related, some unrelated, which we might get onto. The choice I had for me at my time was either cut my body or kill myself. So of the two options, do I run in front of the road or jump off a bridge, or do I cut my body with razor blades? And I mean, even at the time when I was the most, I was delusional because of my psychosis, but the least rational, that was still the most rational choice I could make. Thankfully now, the coping strategy I have with the most recent injury is coaching. So just smashing my coaching, living vicariously for everyone else, and giving as much as I can to other people makes me feel a certain way. When I know I can't train really hard, I can do that. coping mechanisms I have now would be the same. Training as hard as I can, coaching as hard as I can. The coping mechanism I used to have was self-harm. I'm now mentally a bit better.
That's quite. I don't know. It's how to convey how I sort of feel taking that in, because obviously you are my friend, and I've known you for a while now. You know, this is like I said before. I don't know anyone else who has a story quite like this, and I've known you sort of toward the latter end, sort of that story. I've known you go through injuries more recently with your back and now your hip. Are there any? Do you think that your past and your history and everything you've gone through has, in a way, affected your outlook on life and the injuries that you have today?
Yeah, I mean, if I didn't go through that stuff, I would. I wouldn't be the person I am today. I wouldn't be the man I am now. The stuff I went through as a kid was the hardest thing I've ever done, and probably the darkest place I've ever been in. And when you're laying in a hospital bed as a child, thinking, how can I kill myself? How can I get to the road and run in front of the road? It doesn't really get darker than that. It doesn't really get worse than that. So having something like the traumatic injury that just happened to me with a hip, obviously it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, but I got in a pretty bad place afterwards. But every time I get to the worst place, something instinctually inside me, I know how to get out of it, because it doesn't seem as bad as what it was. So when I was suffering as a child with the psychosis and the hearing voices and the thoughts that the government were trying to kill me and the craziness of that, it's probably the most scared I've ever been. It's the most scared I've ever been. It's the most terrified and desperate I've probably ever been. And I managed to get through it with the help of my mum mainly, and with the help with sport, with my mum and with athletics. So yeah, it's definitely helped me now with who I am. It's helped me see things in a better light, but it's also helped me see things in a very realistic light. When something happens, let's say I tore the muscles off my bone and my hip in December. People say to me like, "Oh, you'll come back stronger." Thank you, I appreciate that. I'm also well aware that I might not. And, there's only so much I can actually do. I'm not a superhuman. I joke about being Wolverine, but I'm not. And I'm realistic in the fact that I do think I can get to above where I was, but I'm also aware that I might just not. And I might have another injury. And it sounds a bit pessimistic, but it's realistic. I'm being very optimistic at the moment that I can get back to where I was. Prior to, if I didn't have all this stuff happen to me before, I know that I would be pessimistic with it. As soon as it happened, injury, I'd be done. I'd be 6 weeks laid in bed, depressed, self-harm. I wouldn't want to train. I wouldn't want to do anything. And now, everyone will tell you that the day after the surgery, I was in the gym doing what I can, which wasn't very much. But I was doing something, and I've got more of an optimistic but realistic outlook on life at the moment.
Have you found that
therapy I'm in currently? Yeah. Sorry, the therapy I'm in currently is also very helpful for that. It's about training your brain to kind of look at the automatic responses that you have, the kind of fight, flight, or freeze responses you have to things, and how to deal with that. So, as basically, I am doing much better now, and I don't think you knew me when I wasn't doing well, but that kind of ended for me in 2021-ish, 2022. There's only a few people who I know currently who will know me. So people like Harry Candia, Harry, he knew me back then, and he'll tell you how different I was then, and obviously Claire. But I've gone through a lot, and I feel like now I'm definitely on the other side, but I'm also realistic in knowing that I might relapse and